they were so fascinated about the witches story. And it occurred to me, this is what the West does to us. They concoct things, they cook things, then they bring to us and we accept it as rational. It's witchcraft. It's complete witchcraft. So they've learned even the way they have to sneak and twist our minds and give us awards and money. Is that not witchcraft? They've captured narratives of the future. Hey, those people, man, they've completely captured that space. All the West have captured that one. Okay, unfortunately, I've changed my mind about the role of the government. I feel that the government is a colonial edifice. And so, at least in Kenya, I don't know about other African countries. In Kenya, they've been being guided by IMF, World Bank, very foreign ideas of development. So what has been happening is that innovations that come from below are crushed because the government is not seeing them in their last UN report, ILO report, UNESCO report. It's not there. So they crash that. And yet, I think development, I think we've been saying this on my channel, development has to come from below. Whatever innovations people are making to respond to the problems that they are facing, that's what we should be encouraging and growing. So what the school system should have done is just to give people the tools with which to develop them further and then let the innovation grow. As it grows, you nurture it instead of crushing it, and then now it's Africans who decide, do we need a factory for diapers or do we need a factory for, something else? I think it's us people from below who decide that. But because the government is using development plans from elsewhere, they don't notice when we have these innovations and they crush them. And then now we are forced to try and develop according to plans that are not ours. So I no longer believe in the role of the state in helping guide what we need. I think, at least from what I've seen in Kenya, I think we are very competent now. Kenyans are very innovative people. They come up with the most amazing things, and yet those things are not encouraged. So that's why I no longer care for the role of the colonial state in deciding what we need, because they have done a fairly bad job. I even think of this guy, was it from Zambia or Malawi, the guy who started a windmill with electricity, and it was generating electricity in the village. And he did it based on a storybook from the school library. And he was like, oh, he did this, I can also do that. That's a kind of innovation that's not being allowed to grow in Africa. Just another example, when you look at the apps people are making, they are herded into a hub. And then when they go to the innovation hub, a venture capitalist comes from outside, buys off the thing, and that's the end of the idea. So I'm no longer convinced that we are going to get innovation from the education system. We are going to get it from people. People are coming up with great ideas, but because our plans are so externally determined, we are not seeing those. The people in power are not seeing those innovations and are crashing them. Yeah. So I no longer believe that the government can guide education. I think Kenyan and African people are coming to their own, and they are being able to do great things that are being undermined and crushed by this colonial capitalist system. I'm also now pulling away from that idea of responding. I think the education system should give us access to knowledge which we wouldn't have otherwise had. So I think it's important, for example, to teach Africans about the global community because there are so many forces against us and we are a bit too innocent and naive about that. So I think there's a place to teach that kind of thing. Then just stories and just about the world. Let me just put it that way. How Africans respond to it has to come from our own creativity, ingenuity, and our arts. I think that's how to do it because once the government starts to say, oh, we know what our needs are, let's show you, then they start to impose on the people. But like for me, this story of this boy who harnessed the wind, that's what the story is. What I find interesting about it, that he used a library book about a windmill in Europe and then thought, oh, I can do this here with the local spring or river that is here. I can do that. That's the ingenuity that we are not getting, at least in Kenya. We are not getting that mix of local creativity and ingenuity based on what the knowledge people are being exposed to at school. So I'm not convinced that the government can now tell people this is what we need. They can tell us what's happening out there. They can tell us what they're thinking about and let people grapple with those ideas. But then now let the response come from below and let people innovate things, and then the government can pick them up and develop them. The other thing that we've made a mistake, at least in Kenya, is that we have nowhere else to get education other than the school system and the church. And I've been saying that's not enough. We need libraries everywhere. Let people go to the library, read whatever they want to read. You see, like this boy, he went to a library. Okay, it was a small place with a few books, but he picked a book and read it and thought, aha. So there's a way in which our minds, our creativity works when we are inspired by others. So we just need to put the information out there. Let it be easily accessible. Let people have libraries. Let people have internet. Let's have cultural centers. Let's have interactions. Let's have a festival where we invite Africans from all over the continent to come and share their stories. That's where the innovation is going to come from. But it's not going to come from the school system. The school system should just be one of the triggers for people to say, oh, I heard about a windmill in Netherlands. Can I do it here? And then you try. Or I heard about this in India, a kind of weaving loom. Can I do this? Let me try. So we have to let our people experiment with ideas, let them be inspired by everywhere in the world, and then now come up with innovations which now the governments now pick up and run with them. It's a very... What I'm saying is that we have to do development the other way around. It has to come from below. And I'm so confident the kind of things I've seen people doing. I think there was a kid from, was it Niger or Burkina Faso, who was, I can't remember what he was doing, but it was so amazing. And then you're like, why aren't these ideas being picked up by governments and pushed? So I think we just have to look at the innovation of our people. And I know we are innovative because the West wouldn't be always here, meddling in our business, looking for young people to give scholarships. They wouldn't be here. They know we are innovative. And so they've come up with a system of suppressing that innovation, making our young people go abroad. Those ideas die, but by the time the young people come back, they can't remember what it was they were thinking of. So we have innovation. We just don't see it. And we don't have a system of nurturing it. Yeah. I don't like the system I'm in. The structures are not good at all. They don't help. I can see it myself. I can see it's not helping. It's not helping the students, and it's making me feel like a fraud, because of all these regulations that we have to implement. So I want to say that I am in a contradictory space. I'm not doing what I would like to do or what I think should be done. So right now, where we are right now is that we are trying to implement standards that are not ours, especially in the university. And this has been a silent capture of the universities that people have not seen. That I think for the last 10 or so years, we've been made to bow to the West in the name of quality education. So they defund our universities, give us a model for quality education based on their universities. And then now, because we have no funds to teach our students properly, then everybody says, let me go abroad. So now those who go abroad come back with the ideas of those countries. So that's where we are right now. That's the mess we are in right now. So what I try to do, which I'm not sure that I'm very successful, is to, in fact, sometimes I tell them, this movie, Sarafina, where Mary Masumbuko, she teaches the syllabus, but she also teaches what she thinks the children should know. That's what I do. I tell them, okay, this is a syllabus. Let me show you what, but this is how to think about it. This is why we are being told to teach it. And this is why it doesn't respond to our needs. Of course, the students get very irritated because they're like, just give me what I need to learn to pass. Why are you bothering me with this? It's later on, 5 years later, when they write back to me and say, oh, I'm so glad you told us. Now I see what you are saying. So that's the play, the dance that we educators have to play. We have to, in a sense, play to the system, but on the other hand, we try to say, this is what you need to know. This is why these things are being done this way. So ideally, if this system was not there, I think that I would like to, I haven't thought about it very much because I haven't studied, but I would like to know what universities were the African ones before colonialism, because I imagine that there was no system for making sure that everybody does this grade, this certificate, then they enter the university. That was not there. The university was just open, an open place for people to study and learn and discuss. And people outside the university, if they want to come and learn or ask questions, they can come in. I think for me, that would be my ideal, that people like us who think a lot and are reading a lot and meeting people a lot, we just let people come in. Anyone. A farmer can come and say, I want to know how people farm in Senegal. I might not know, but I know somebody who I can ask. And then we can connect. Now that we have internet, we can connect and, do something together. So I should actually be the librarian, the facilitator of whatever it is people want to learn and innovate. That's what I think an ideal education should be. Not this thing of do this, a syllabus, do this, then pass here, get this certificate, move to the next level. For me, I would like to do away with that. But yeah, that's just my dream. Yeah. Okay, like for me, one of the things that if it's not a captured government, I would like protection. I would like protection from foreign interference. They don't give us that. So, for example, when you see these young people coming with apps that are so dynamic and innovative, why are there venture capitalists coming in, swooping in? In fact, I call them vulture capitalists. They swoop in, build a hub, quote unquote, buy those ideas, and those ideas go to die. So at the level of government, this is the kind of protection I need. They should be asking these people, who are you and what do you want? We don't allow our young people to give away their ideas like that. And if it's money, it's the government that should be giving us that money. So for me, I get what you're saying, but you see, okay, there's no but. what I would like to see is a government with a philosophy, a political philosophy of saying, we are here for the people. So if the people say, oh, we need, a milk processor here, then they provide it. That I accept. My problem is when you don't have a political philosophy of the people, what happens is that when you start guiding development, you're guiding it on foreign ideas. So for me, I want that protection. I want that protection that a young person who is coming up with something, the idea is not taken by a venture capitalist. The same thing for the universities. Why did foreign universities at least come to Kenya and so easily tell us what to do in the name of workshops, foreign exchange? You see, for academics, we are very naive. We think that ideas are not political. So we were there accepting, this is global standards, world-class education. But it was a political project. Who can ask those questions? It's the politicians, the government. But we don't have that kind of a government that would say, excuse me, why are you here? What do you want? And also allow those of us in the system who are politically minded, listen to us when we are telling you these ideas are not innocent. They're coming to control us. But so when you have a government that doesn't have a political philosophy of the people, it cannot have an education that is for the people. So I'm thinking of maybe places like Cuba. They were deliberate. So when they're saying our people need medical care, we're going to develop it, it comes from a political philosophy that's based on the people. Africa doesn't have those governments. Our governments are based on foreigners, and especially Kenya. We are based on foreign ideas. We are based on foreign stories and foreign capital. So when the government intervenes and tells us this is the education you need for development, they're basically following our UNESCO story. It's not about us and what we want. And when our people come up with new ideas, they crush them because it's not in the development plan. How are you going to talk about this when you go for the next performance management meeting or when you go for the next UNESCO conference? How are you going to explain that? So they crush our ideas. So I think the kind of government you're talking about is a government that has done the work of having a political philosophy that is pro-people and anti-imperialist. Those two. Without that, they can come up with all the programs they want. They are not going to work. I started my education here. And then when I finished my master's, I studied abroad. And again, my biography in terms of education is ironic because I thought I was doing the good thing. Because everyone's celebrating you. You go to the right school. Oh, very good. Then when you go to the US is where I went. Oh, wow, you're in the US. And then I was studying French, so I did a stint in France. So when I came back, I came with that celebration of, oh, now I'm coming to develop my country. What happened next is a story of, there was no such thing. There was no such thing. First, I was told we don't. And the other thing that happened when I was abroad was that now I connected with the diaspora. I started to understand African Americans. What are they really saying? And then I was in France on top of that. And I studied, my dissertation was on migration. So I was understanding why it is that Francophone African nationals are coming to France for a better life, because I knew what France was doing in Africa. So I now had a global picture of the interaction between Africa, our diaspora in the Americas, and Europe. So I come back to Kenya thinking, oh, now I'm going to talk about these things because I didn't know them and I was so excited. Now I can talk about them and tell my students about them. I get here, I'm told, oh, no, we don't need the arts. That's irrelevant to the market. We don't need to understand history. What for? It doesn't produce anything. What is this theory? Why are you theorizing? How does that help us? How does that help Mama Mboga, the lady who sells vegetables? How does that help her? So I was so shocked by that. And I was like, but I can see how knowledge can help us in these problems we are facing. And everybody would be like, no, there's no market for this. Who is going to be employed for this? So that's when I started digging deeper. Why are we thinking like this? What is the problem? So then I start going, that's when I discover about neoliberalism. Can you imagine? I go through all this education until PhD and nobody ever gave me a class on neoliberalism. What kind of system is this, really? Also, we have no opportunities here. That's the real thing. Huh? We have no opportunities here, especially for the young people. So when those yearly fellowships come, it's such a great opportunity. They don't have to have visa problems. You see, it's even though they're using us, it's so much better than what we get at home. So you see the next person celebrating, then you're just like, okay. I mean, I don't know what to say, because if I say anything, people think I'm jealous. I don't want people to progress. So I've just been hinting in my interviews. I think young people need to ask themselves, why are we getting these fellowships? Why are we getting these scholarships? And the West is so good at picking people out. Oh, they know how to get them. They go to the schools, the festivals, they see who seems to be talking. In fact, I was saying, even with these protests, you'll just see within a few years that all the top faces in these protests will be getting scholarships. They're so good at this and giving awards. And, oh, Lord. So how do we counter that? I think the important thing is to first, let's admit that this is there. So that even if people go abroad, because I went abroad and I didn't learn the way the West wanted me to learn, I learned something else. So at least our eyes are open when we are going there, that we are part of a system, and that the job of that system is to make sure that we don't think anymore, that we are blind to imperialism. So yeah, those fellowships, they disturb me so deeply. But, what can I say when our countries are not giving young people the opportunities? It's very hard to speak. It's very difficult to say something, yeah. I was talking of decolonizing in 2007. When I was writing my dissertation, I actually wrote it on decolonizing. And I was talking about the way we think of nature, the environment, our relation as Africans to our environment, our spirituality, all those, and how they help us make political decisions. From what I've seen, the decolonizing today, I don't think that's what it is. First of all, I find it curious that the people who are pushing the narrative is the West. I mean, most of the invitations I have got to talk about decolonizing are from Western-sponsored forums. So already that tells me that something is off. Why is it them running that agenda? But I think it's what I was saying even about the young people. Anytime Africans come up with a new idea, before we have time to ask what you're asking, what does it mean? What does it look like? How would it's captured. It's now captured and promoted by the West. So that's where we are right now. It has been captured. The idea has been captured. It's no longer ours. I don't think it is. So we now have to come up with something else. The other thing is, the problem is the banners. The West reduces everything to a banner, a one word. So decolonizing has become that word. So I think we Africans have to not follow these catchwords and start talking more about the ideas. What do we want? Whether it's decolonizing or not is neither here nor there. There are times where we have to talk about decolonizing, but that's not the only thing to talk about. So what does it mean for me? I think it means, the things I want Africa to do, I don't know. One, we have to become philosophical again. Maybe this is not I don't know about other African countries, but Kenya is deeply anti-philosophical. Deeply. People never allow us to ask the question, why? And is this what we should be? Those questions are not allowed. We are also not allowed to talk about reality. There's a whole, the narratives we have, they prevent connecting reality to ideas. And you see, that's what thinking is. Thinking is the connection of reality to ideas. You're interpreting reality, but that's not allowed. So for me, when I talk of decolonizing, that's what I want us to get rid of. This whole infrastructure that prevents Kenyans from asking why. What should we be? Is this what we want? Those questions. To decolonize will be to give ourselves permission to ask those questions and to be okay with imagination. In Kenya, we are told imagination is a waste of time. It's too intellectual. It has nothing to do with anything. It doesn't put food on the table. There's this whole narrative that anything to do with the mind, the soul, and the spirit is useless to the market. It does not put food on the table. That's how we talk. So to decolonize for me would be to give ourselves permission to imagine, to think, and to say it's okay. We might not have a concrete solution to anything right now, but we have to take the time to imagine. That's for me is the real decolonizing project. And it doesn't matter how we imagine it. It can be through stories, it can be through technology, it can be through farming. It doesn't matter for me. I just want Africans to say, I don't know whether this will work, but let me try. This is what I have in my head. Let me see if it works. Let me look at the problems. Let me talk to people. That's what I want. That permission to imagine, that to me is the decolonizing. What the decolonizing that we are getting is pushing us to fit in a certain pipeline that I can't say, let me understand how this engine works, this car engine. Let me see how it works. What happens is we are told, is that a decolonial? I mean, who cares whether a car is decolonized or not? And in fact, I had Olufemi Taiwo, the senior, saying, we are getting to a point where African students are being told to decolonize boiling water. I mean, so that's what has happened. It has become a brand, a banner, a catchphrase that is put everywhere, even when it is not necessary and it's not relevant. And it's the West's way of telling us, this is the only route I can understand you. I can only understand you when you're saying decolonizing somewhere. Yes, you sprinkle the word decolonizing, then I can understand you. So that's what has happened to decolonizing, and it's what has happened to many ideas from Africa. This is not the first time. Africans start to say we need to think about things differently. The word is picked by the West, promoted, distorted, and in the end, we can't recognize what decolonizing was when we started. So that's been the fate of decolonizing. Now we have to look for another word, I think, for us to talk about what is facing us as the continent. Actually, I agree, yeah? I completely agree. Okay, let me rephrase. Maybe it's not dumping the word and looking for another one, but I think there's a way we are naive about the way the West operates. And I think that's what we need to start educating ourselves. Like what I'm telling you, that they capture our words, take them and start promoting them. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about it. Or even what we are saying about our young people innovate, then venture capitalists come. Because you see, when they come, at least in Kenya, we celebrate. We fail to see that this is a problem. So I think we need to be a bit less naive about what happens to our ideas. That when we start to say decolonize, we have to realize it's going to be branded and promoted like a product. That's what the West does. It reduces ideas to products and starts marketing them. And we have to realize that. So if Africans want to learn about decolonizing, first of all, they should be suspicious when that is being promoted by the West. I mean, like the first decolonizing conference in Kenya was sponsored by the British Council. I mean, really. I mean, these are the questions we should be asking. And I think for Kenya, at least, why we are so vulnerable to that manipulation is already because we believe that ideas don't matter. We think the only thing Africans are their bodies. And in fact, people will ask you when you talk of an idea, they say, oh, the person in the village doesn't care. What they want is bread on the table. But how does that person put bread on the table? They come up with the idea first. So first, we have to stop believing that Africans do not think, that ideas are not African. We are a very idea people. And in fact, what is unique about us is that our ideas are spiritually inspired. They're inspired by our environment. So we are very spiritual, intellectual people. If we don't get that, it will be so easy for the West to keep capturing our ideas, because when we come up with decolonizing, we are not realizing its idea. The West has. They've seen this is an idea. So they capture it before even us we are realizing, hey, by the way, this is an idea. I need to think about it. I need to add more knowledge. I need to talk with people. I need to research. I need to get stories. Before we've done that, it's been captured and taken off. And it's now in a Western academic factory for rebranding. And then now they will sell it back to us. So it's not even so much what the West does, is that we are not aware that our ideas matter. And also, I think there's a narrative which I think is it's not very unhelpful, but we need to reconsider it. When we say the West wants us for our material resources, that is true. But they also come for our ideas. They come for our ideas, they take them, they rebrand them, repackage them, and bring them back to us through our school system. If we don't understand that, they will keep on taking our minerals, because when a young person starts realizing, oh, I can use this stone to do this, we can do that, before even the government has realized it, there's a Western anthropologist who was snooping around in the summer semester. Snooping around, they take it back, talk about it, and then it's repackaged and brought back to us. I've seen even there's an irrigation technique from West Africa, indigenous. I saw it was being promoted by Western NGOs in Kenya. So, gosh, I think racism has told us as Africans that we don't think ideas have to come from the West, as our job is to implement. And the Kenyan education system is based on that idea. Don't think, get instructions, implement them. So if we don't understand that system, we are not going to understand what happens to our ideas. Nationalism was taken. It was taken by the West, repackaged and brought back to us. And it was, what is the word? It was a mutation, yes. The mutation of that idea was brought back to us, and that was the mess of our post-independence years. The same thing is happening with decolonization. It started here with us. It has gone to academic factories. The mutation is now being brought back to us. So we need to understand that ideas are also part of Africa's export. It's not just our minerals. It's not just what is on the ground. It's also what we think, our arts, our music, our inspiration, our spirituality. All those are also part of the extraction of the West, which they repackage and bring back to us. So decolonizing, that has now happened. It has happened that our idea has been taken. It has been repackaged. As long as we understand that, then we can remember to use it in the way that means something to us. Yeah. Everything that comes from the West is good. And to point out that it's Western is to be racist. So it's in the education system. One of the things that made me have my turnaround in education was these quality standards that I was mentioning earlier. I asked, isn't it odd? Why are Europeans telling us how to make our universities better? Isn't that odd? I thought we are decolonizing here. I was told, no, the standards are for everywhere. They want us to have a better education system. And then I'm like, as who? Why are we not having this conversation? So Jemima Pierre will tell you about this, that in Africa we have a trained inability we've been trained not to see racism in Africa. We've been trained not to see racism. So even when it's there in our face, at least in Kenya, people will say, no, you don't look at it that way. It was not about that person. It was just an honest mistake. So you go to a hotel in Africa and you're served after the white person, and you're told, no, that was just an honest mistake. So you see, we've been trained not to see. The second part of that infrastructure is that racism, and she also says this, racism is seen as a conflict, direct conflict between whites and blacks. It's not seen as a system. So whenever you tell Africans about racism, they think of as the Jim Crow America and immigration in Europe, and then, all these right-wing people, or apartheid South Africa. So anything that's outside there, people don't see it as a racism problem. So we as Africans don't see it. But the third thing I've discovered is our weakness, is that we've believed Africans don't think. We've believed we cannot talk about systems. Our whole experience, which is the function of racism, is reduced to our bodies. So anything that we discuss outside of our bodies, we are told, no, that's not for you. That's not how it is said, but that's really what's going on. We are being told we cannot discuss anything that's beyond the physical self. So unless you're discriminated against individually and physically, you can't talk about systems that are racist in nature. So that's for at least where I see Kenya, the fact that we don't believe Africans think that the realm of ideas should include Africans. As long as we don't see that problem, we are not going to see racism. Because racism for many Kenyans is about the personal. It's about a Mzungu insulting you. It's about a Mzungu shooting you. It's about a Mzungu getting this and you didn't get it. That's the level of racism we are talking about in Kenya. It's never ideas, structures, institutions, because, no, you Africans, you don't need that. What you need is bread on the table and water to drink. You don't go to that level. That's not for you. You people, you're at the basic, you're at drought, hunger, and disease. You stay there. If you want to discuss ideas, institutions, no, let the Wazungu do that for you. So that's why we don't see the racism, because we are looking at the body. And isn't that the function of racism? It's to say that Africans are determined by their skin color, by their physique. We have no history. We have no ideas. There's nothing beyond us. Everything is to do with our skin color. and our bodies. As women, as men, as Africans, it's biopolitics. That's what racism is. Racism is saying everything you do, everything you think is determined by your physical body. The fact that you're born with melanin. Then that determines everything. So we Africans have to get out of the idea that ideas are for the West, physical work is for Africa. And right now our education system is structured on that idea, that the technical, physical part is done by the Africans, the thinking part is done by the Europeans. That's the dichotomy that allows racism to persist, because anytime we start saying, but this system, why are these decisions being made? Why are these ideas being propagated? We'll be told, no, that doesn't have anything to do with Mama Mboga. That's how basic we are. How is the farmer in the village affected by racism? They have never seen a mzungu anyway, only on TV. So racism doesn't matter to them. Of course it does, because that farmer will probably have had a new irrigation system by now, if it wasn't for the racist structure of IMF and World Bank. So it's connected to him. But to make that connection is ideas. It's intellect. And we are not allowed to be intellectual. So that's how racism is in the education system. Completely. How do you have a country where a university system where you've already told people they don't need to think? That's an abomination. And yet we've accepted it. Because for you to move from the problem to solution, that's a process of thinking. Since Africans are not allowed to think, so they jump. You're supposed to jump from problem to solution. But who did the thinking that produced the solution you're implementing? It's the West. So what the West is really saying is, here is the solution. Why are you thinking? Why are you wasting your time thinking? Will the woman in the village care whether you're thinking or not? What they want is a solution. And really what they're telling us is that the solution has already been thought for us, so you adapt it and implement it. Bill Gates said that about, what's her name? Dambisa Moyo. And Dambisa Moyo is a fairly conservative thinker. But even her, she was told she's evil. There's that clip where he's saying, how dare you think about this process of exploiting Africa? What Africans need are tablets. You see, that's the other reason that's how he thinks about disease. We need tablets. We don't need research. We don't need to think about what our problem is. What we need is a tablet. I have produced the tablet, distribute it. So if now you as an African say, but wait a minute, this disease is coming from an environmental thing, we need to start, what will you be told? That's out of your league. What do you mean environmental solutions? That's not for you people. That's for us to figure it out. Yeah. What does a woman in the village being poisoned by nuclear waste need? She needs the nuclear waste to go. So these questions you have about how did the nuclear waste come to Africa? No, that's not for you. Thinking is not for you. That's for us to do, and then we'll tell you what to implement. It's thinking. Racism does not consider Black people thinking people. So they are always trying to remove the thinking element from anything they do and to give us solutions, and then we implement. So that's racism and thinking, they are together. As long as we are treated as non-thinking human beings, we'll always be given solutions to implement. And there's a system that makes that possible because, like we were saying, the reason why they pluck young people out of Africa is to stop the thinking. Let's take them and they can go and think what we want them to think. By the time they come back, those ideas they wanted to think about are dead. So it's a war on thinking. I couldn't decide between Thomas Sankara where he says, we revolutionaries never get tired of explaining. And that is something that keeps me encouraged, because what the kind of conversations I'm trying to have, I'm very lonely in Kenya. It's too much for Kenyans. And not badly, it's just that we have an anti-intellectual system. So you have to break a lot of intellectual boundaries to get to what I'm talking about. So that quote, I don't know it. I'm not quoting it directly, but that we revolutionaries never get tired of explaining. I realized I have to keep explaining. It's tiring, but I have to do it. And then Che Guevara says something about the revolutionary is driven by a deep feeling of love. Love is at the core of it. If we don't check how we feel about each other, how we express that feeling towards each other, that is part of, we need to also talk about that because it's part of the revolutionary project. Soul. I think we're not talking about soul enough. Yeah. And I've already kind of touched on it when I've talked about love. I'm not a philosopher, but I think our soul is where our feelings, our ideas, and our spirituality, those three things, that's where they come together. I don't think we talk about that enough. We don't talk about how something makes us feel about ourselves and our dignity. Because if we are tuned into those feelings and our instincts, I think there are a lot of things we would see are wrong even from 10 miles away. We would, because our sense of our soul tells us, no, that's not it. It whispers something. And I think that's what the West crushes first. Even before they come for our minerals, they first come for our soul. They come and tell us to distrust our feelings, to distrust our ideas, and to distrust our spirituality. And the tragedy, at least in Kenya and a lot of countries, is that the spiritual language has been captured by Western Christianity. We are not even allowed to talk about liberation or Black theology. We're not allowed to see spiritualities like voodoo, like there's another one from Brazil. We are not allowed to see these spiritualities as simply part of the African expression. They've been turned into magic, kind of. They've been mystified so much that we don't talk about them as part of our existence. So I think we are not talking enough about those three areas: the intellect, our feelings, and our spirituality. We are not talking enough about them. And that's why I see people saying, what's wrong with African leaders and what? That's where the problem is. It's not the right ideology or the right leadership manual. It's our spirituality. The ability to say that's not right for me, for the unborn, and for the people who have left us. That ability to say, when I think of me as a parent to the unborn and a child of the ancestors, this doesn't sit right for us. That language is not in Africa. And yet it's who we are. I mean, when you look at what Yvonne was saying, how did we survive? It's our spirituality that has made us survive. There's something about the African soul that is so powerful and so loving, and that I think there's a way in which even our environment, we connect to our environment. That soul is our richest. That's our riches. Our riches are there. It's not even in the minerals, it's in our soul. That we look at the animal life, we look at the ancestors, we look at the sky, and we see all these things as part of who we are. I think that's how we have survived. But the West tries to narrow that to the intellect and then tell us the intellect is for the West and us, we are just the action. So I think if we start becoming soulful and start saying how we love, how we feel, how we think should also be part of our connection to our ancestors. I think there are so many things we would get rid of almost immediately. So that's what I think is not talked about enough. Education for me, I think, I'm trying to look for the term. This small thing which you don't deal with that ends up being the root for everything that goes wrong. I think the school system is it. We didn't pay attention to the school system. We assumed that the knowledge in the school system is neutral. What the problem is the actors. I think that has been our undoing, because these days I can see how everything that comes from the West into Africa, at least into Kenya, is coming from the school system. You're educating young people. And isn't it interesting? One of the things I've started to feel really bad about is the young age at which we take children to school. We are captured. We are captured in our teenage and our youth. And it's when we are in our 30s, 40s is when we realize we've been duped for the last 40 years. I think that's the intellectual part that a lot of Africans are just like, I can't deal with it. 40 years of my life has gone to a lie. You just decide, I can't deal with it emotionally. At an emotional level, I can't deal with it. And I had that breakdown when I was turning 50. That was when I realized I've lived a lie. I aspired to get to the top of a system, and this system never intended for me to use my knowledge. It was never intended. I had a breakdown for 2 months because of that realization. It's very emotionally difficult to deal with. Yeah. So I would tell people, first of all, taking kids to school beyond the age of 13, leave it out. Let kids go and work in the farm. They can learn to read and write, but don't teach them. Let's not teach them anything from the school system. Let them come in their teenage or even older. And then come and learn things, not to tell them what to be, but to open up their minds. See, these are teenagers. Now they want to know beyond mommy and daddy. What else is there? So now that's when you tell them this is Kenya, this is Africa, this is history, this is tech. Now you start telling them those things, which they integrate with now their experience. But taking kids to school at 4, I think that's the way in which we are captured, because by the time you reach 18, which is when you start to work, now the West comes with its fellowships, its universities, its what. So you delay that reckoning for another 10 years. And then by that time, you've already gotten children, you're taking them to the system. So me, I would have said at independence, let's rethink the school system. Do we need to go so early? What do we want to learn? What do we need to know? And then also libraries, so that it's not only the school system that's dominating knowledge. Let's have libraries, exchange programs. Let's have an African exchange program where teenagers are going across schools so that we know each other. That's what I would have said. Forget this. I mean, I'm not saying completely forget it, but I would have said, no, we need to really, really look at it. Yeah, I think we underestimated the power of the school system and how it is training intellectuals to be the native informants for the West. So that's why the West is always ahead of us, because when they want to spread something, they come to us in the universities. Us in the universities, we take it to the whatever, and then it just keeps on going on and on like that. Yeah.